to go. So
Not muted now. Okay.
it is 7:00 p.m. On Tuesday, February 9th, 2021, and I will call the meeting of the Manitowoc Public School District Board of Education to order, and we will begin with our Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay.
So, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Then I will ask our secretary to take a roll.
Lisa Johnston.
Here.
Dave Nichols.
Here.
Richard Nitch.
Here.
Meredith Sauer. Here. Catherine Chalou. Carrie Trask.
Here.
And Kathy Willis.
Here.
Thank you.
And then I would ask for a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the January 22nd or 26th special board meeting.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes from the January 26th board meeting.
I'll second.
Any additions or corrections to the minutes? If not, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, minutes are carried.
Sorry, I'll be right back.
I assume all of you are receiving communications from the community, and we will continue to, respond to those. So, I mean, that's a good thing. We're getting input. The next item is public input. We didn't have anybody sign up, and there's nobody in the room. But I'll just ask 3 times if there's any public input. Anyone for public input? And a 3rd time public input. And so we're going to close that. The next is our school showcase. So Washington Middle School, you are up, Courtney.
Cool.
Go ahead. And Lance is here, I guess, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, you're good.
Yeah, I just want to do a sound check and make sure you can hear okay.
Yes.
And if it's possible for me to present,
Sure.
I would like to share our presentation.
Yeah,
And
it's
is
working,
everyone-
Lance. Yep.
Excellent, excellent. Okay. So I'm Lance Masters. I'm the principal at Washington Middle School. And tonight you'll hear from Courtney Schultz, who's our associate principal, and Lisa Delsman, who is our student success leader. And we are very excited to share about some things that are happening at Washington. It has been quite a tumultuous year. We think about our students. We're asking them to do some things that we never would have thought about. Log in to class instead of attend class. Get your hotspot. Turn in your broken Chromebook. Get it fixed. All of those things. We think about our teachers. Again, a year ago, we never would have even known what a Google Meet was, and they're navigating those. They work very, very hard to make sure that that students are learning. And we could talk about what it's like to be an administrator, director, even a superintendent. We also don't want to forget that it has been a difficult year to be a school board member. And your leadership for our community is much appreciated. So on behalf of the students and the whole Washington learning community, we want to say thank you for your service to Manitowoc. We appreciate you. Now, I know that most of you have seen our slideshow in the packet, the board packet. It included a lot of videos, some data sets, and really what we consider the voices of the wolves about some of the great innovative things that are happening at Washington. We have decided, in the interest of brevity, to share with you some highlights from that slideshow this evening. And really, we would just want to tell 2 short stories about Washington Middle School. And all of the stories start in July of 2020. We brought a team of teachers together to review Some data. We looked at 4 or 5 year data trends for our school, and we were able to confront what we saw as some declining achievement scores, increases in our behavior instance at school, and declining attendance rates. And to their credit, that group of teachers developed a school goal to address each of these trends. And to put it simply, that school goal is every student in every class, every day, will have the opportunity to demonstrate their learning by speaking, writing, interacting, reading, and listening. And tonight we're going to hear stories about speaking, writing, interacting, reading, and listening, which forms what we call the Washington Swirl. So these stories are first about tears, a story about circles, and I'll tell a story about the swirl. So the first story is told by Lisa Delsman, our school success leader.
Thank you, Lance. So the story of tiers starts with our development of our 3-tiered attendance system, and this was in direct response to our declining attendance rates. Tier 1 is developed for all students. It is where we take attendance in every class every day, and we use our outreach time connecting with families. Tier 2 is for that special group of students that still need a little bit of extra support getting to school, logging into their classes. And that's where we developed a system where we do wellness checks with their families, with the student, offer any supports we have that we can give them or what do they need from us. We did home visits, we did calling home, sent postcards, checked in, did lots of outreach. Tier 3 is for that small percentage of students, less than 5% of our students that weren't coming to school. What are we going to do there? And that's where we had parent meetings, letters sent home, and ultimately it could have ended in a truancy fine for that student. What we recognized as we were working through that system was the attendance tiers only take us so far, and we wanted more for our students. Because of this, we developed a 3-tiered engagement system. Our #1 priority in our school is every student, every class, every day, which is why connections and relationships are so important. Our engagement system started with our outreach time that we have embedded into our schedule. It's where we ask our teachers, our paras, our adults in our building to spend extra time outreaching, making connections with our families and our students. Tier 1 is for every student. It's where we build relationships, make connections with students. We have a huge, extensive list that's linked in your PowerPoint that we just keep adding to in different ways of being creative and engaging students and families. Tier 2 is that we just need a little bit of extra. What's that little bit of extra looking like? And we developed a system with a champion in our building. It's an adult in our building that makes a connection, has a connection with the student, and does some checking in with them. Tier 3 is, again, for that small percentage of students that just need a little bit of extra support. In Tier 3, we seek support from our behavior specialists in our district, Lynette Seminar, our behavior specialists in our building. We ask for support within the classroom, making observations, helping connect with the parent, with the student, and building that deeper relationship with that student and that family. Our engagement tiers have helped develop connections with our advisory buddies in our building. We developed parent relationships. We started home visits. We initiated postcards and celebrations sent home. This all results in our students feeling connected to our staff and to our building. Next up is our story about circles told by our Associate Principal, Courtney Schultz.
Thank you, Lisa. At Washington, you might say circles are our favorite shape. A circle is a gathering in which all participants facilitate open, direct communication, as you can see in the picture here that's presented. Every student gets a chance. Every student has a voice. Every student is a part of something important. In our data, we saw an increase in behavior incidents. We learned that forcing or incentivizing change doesn't teach students the reason for the change. But when every student knows that our approach is to give them a voice, they know their voice matters. We hear their story, help them understand their impact on our learning community, and help them guide them into a different direction. The Washington learning community understands that when it comes to student behavior success, 80% of our efforts must be proactive. Punishment isn't the answer. Every student has a story. Some are told, others are discovered. This is why Washington uses restorative practices. Restorative practices embrace the student as valued members of our community. It helps us identify the true causes of those behaviors, as you can see in the iceberg effect. What we see is really only the tip of the iceberg, those behaviors that are acted out. But the meaning behind those challenging behaviors lies beneath the surface. And our circles, as we call them, our circle up, helps us to understand that story of what lies beneath the surface. It helps our students reflect and understand their impact, helps them learn from their mistakes, build empathy and listening skills, restore relationships, and repair harm that may have been done. Ultimately, it's strengthening leadership and connections within our community. At Washington, circles are used by every student every day as part of their classes to encourage sharing, because students that are heard feel valued, and those that feel valued bring respect to their relationships and their community. This isn't easy work. Without a doubt, it's the right work. Next, Mr. Masters will share a story about Swirl.
Thank you, Courtney, and thank you, Lisa. The story about the Washington Swirl starts in a bowling alley. If you think about bowling, when you first start out, we're trying to get that ball to roll right down the middle in hopes that it will knock over all the pins. And usually, if you can get it right down the middle, you get most of the pins. And then you end up with the two most difficult pins, the 7 and the 10. They're the hardest to reach. And when you become an experienced bowler, like my brother-in-law, Nick, you end up learning that to get the strike, you got to change the way you aim. And that's what we're doing at Washington with our Swirl goal. We have decided that we are going to change the way we aim every lesson in every class, every day for every student, because the lesson needs to be geared so that all students have access to the learning. And the learning is going to focus on skills of speaking, writing, interacting, reading, and listening, the Washington Swirl. And it's not good enough to just have that goal. We have to put some action behind it. And so what we've done is we've taken our reading teachers, our special ed teachers, our English language teachers, and we've embedded them in our planning teams so that every core team that plans a lesson has a specialist who has skills in how to make learning accessible for all students right there at the planning stage. And what that does is it changes the way we aim every lesson. In addition, we're not satisfied with that. We also focus on a specific Swirl strategy, such as a stop and jot or a sentence frame, that we share with the staff as a theme for the month. And then every staff meeting of the month has a different way that you can use that strategy so that the teachers could take it to their class the next day. And the next thing we do is we celebrate the results. Because I can tell you, we ask our students every month how we're doing. Courtney and I take observations specific to using these Swirl strategies in every class that we visit. Our teachers report to us how they're engaging students with the Swirl strategies. And we've started asking our parents, are they hearing about this Swirl thing? And by and large, you can see that the results are we are changing our focus as a school, and we're focusing on the exact skills that are going to make these students successful. We have a lot of reasons to celebrate, and we do that together. But after about 100 days of working towards this goal and celebrating the results, we started to ask ourselves, what's next? And we are really excited about what's next. We decided to take Swirl on the road. And so we've engaged community leaders, business owners, other people in the community to talk to them about Swirl and ask them to deliver messages to our students. So starting in January, every Thursday, every student at Washington gets to hear a message from a community leader about how they use Swirl in their career. and how it's important in their life. And they challenge our students to work hard to develop these skills that will then be useful to help them become successful later in life. So we're excited about the progress we've made, but we're also excited about how we're engaging the community in that specific practice of the Washington Swirl. So those are our stories. To sum it up, what I would say is each of these stories comes together in a message to our students, and it's 2 words. The message is, you matter. You matter because we won't rest until we see you engaged in learning. You matter because your voice is a part of everything we do. You matter because your future is going to be better because of what you are doing in our school today. Those are our stories, and we do want to save time if you have questions.
I don't have,
Any questions
I don't have a
out there?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I'm certainly familiar with the 3-tier approach as it's used for learning. I really like the idea that that's being applied to engagement. I think that's a smart move. And I also have to comment that I like the analogy of bowling. It really does make sense. You throw the ball down the middle and you're still apt to miss a couple, so you have to change your aim so you get everybody, so love the analogy, and I enjoyed the presentation. Sounds like you're doing some good things at Washington Middle School.
I do have 2 questions for you guys. The first one is, I'm wondering, how do the community members get their messages to the students? Like, what, I'm assuming right now you're doing something virtually, but like at what time, or is it certain classes? Like, how is that message received?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that. So what we've done is we have we call it the Swirl team, and they're kind of our guiding coalition, so to speak, for Swirl strategies. And what they've done is they've engaged our staff in reaching out to people in the community that they know to talk to them about Swirl and to ask if they'd like to deliver a message. We've had overwhelming support from businesses, community members. So what they'll do is they'll make a connection with a staff member, they'll record a video, and then that video is shared with Courtney, who sends it out to all of our teachers, was it Monday, so that they're prepared to share that with the students and have a school-wide discussion about that. So in each individual class, they get to watch it, and then they get to have that circle up around, do you see yourself doing these things that this community member is talking to us about?
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then my other question is, I'm just wondering, with your restorative practices for behavior, can you guys actually give an example, not a real, of course you have to make this up right now, but give us an example of exactly what's done. I mean, to me right now, it sounds good, but I want to know what the real meat of it is. How is it actually used? So.
Sure. So let's say that we have a student that has an issue with another student in class. Maybe the 2 of them caused an argument and it disrupted the learning environment. What we would do first, there's a few options, but the first thing that we want to do is talk to the student. And instead of just saying, you caused a disruption, you're out, let's talk and find out what happened. Likely there's a story that hasn't been told about that led to this event occurring. So we invite the teacher to take that student aside, or one of us from the office, and talk to the student aside and ask, hey, it sounds like you're having difficulty in class right now. What's going on? And help us discover the frustration that may lie beneath, and then guide them to restore the relationship that might have been harmed, come back to the classroom and repair the harm within the classroom, and then make a plan for going forward so that they can really think about, how do my actions impact the people that are around me? How do my actions impact my class, my teachers, even the families of the students? Everything that I do has an impact. So we focus on those conversations, and likely when we just take that extra second to listen, we can really find out what's going on, and it solves so many problems.
Nice. All right, thanks.
You bet.
So it isn't a power relationship, right? It's a collaboration relationship. And how does it work for tier 2 and 3 people?
There are times where we have to take a little more of a targeted approach. So sometimes we have to think about, are there some skills that a student is having difficulty with over and over again? Because sometimes there's just a one event kind of a situation. Other times there's things that are difficult for that student to handle. So we might have more of like a plan B conversations, we like to call it, where we say, hey, I'm noticing you're having a difficult time with this. And then we work with that student and have them problem solve and think about what's an action I can take to help create a better future for myself. And it takes accountability on their part and the adult's part, but collaborating around that solution, helping them realize that they can solve problems and change the impact that they're having on the people around them.
So they feel better about themselves generally?
Yeah, it helps them realize that they have control over their choices. Sometimes it can feel very out of control, but we try to help guide them through some skills that they may be having difficulty with and help them to feel successful with those skills.
Okay, anything else? Okay, thank you, Lance and Courtney and
It's
Lisa.
like a great program, really. Yeah.
Yeah, very much appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, the next item of business is our report of the superintendent, and we start with Angela with our payment of vouchers.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yes, we have just our accounts payable for the month of January in the amount of $4.2 million and our payroll for $2 million. And so we're just looking for, I can take any questions, but we're looking for an approval of payment of vouchers for the month of January.
Could use a motion and a second on that?
I'll move we approve the vouchers for the month of January.
I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
All right.
And that is approved. And then the next is your monthly financial report, Angela.
Yes, the only, one of the things I've been working with our bookkeeper on is just to change the format of the reports. So you'll see that the first 2 pages of the reports appear similar to how they have in the past. But then we're moving to just a format where you can see like the current year to date activity compared to last year. And, most of the revenues and expenditures are tracking very similar from year to year. So we'll be able to kind of see that visually from month to month from now on. So, that's my biggest update on there. Everything is kind of going as scheduled for the year. Major thing that we're working on now are the CARES Act funding reporting for the month. We have to get a report in by tomorrow to report the progress on that. Otherwise, we're just working towards just continuing our regular fiscal activity for the year.
Any questions for Angela on the monthly financial report?
Oh, but I love the idea that we're getting that comparison from the previous year. That's really nice. That will help us kind of deem where we're at, like you said. So thanks.
Yes, not a problem.
Okay, thank you, Angela.
You're welcome.
And next, Joyce with our personnel report.
All right, thank you, everyone. You should have received the personnel report in board book. You'll notice that, for example, at Lincoln High School, you're going to start seeing positions for what would normally be our fall sports. So, for example, girls swimming started this week. And then volleyball starts the week of February 22nd. And again, there'll be some other, what again would normally be fall sports, that'll be starting in March as well. So you'll see some additional stipends moving forward. But any questions that you have?
Joyce, I have a question regarding basketball stipends. What resulted in the amendment that was changed from January 26th? And I see a discrepancy of 610 to 664. Can you just kind of clarify what the reasoning is for that?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. That's a good question. Yeah, so the amendment is due, there were some incorrect names of coaches listed. And really what happened was initially we were going to have, for example, a coach that coached both girls basketball and, for example, boys basketball, and did not feel that that was a good practice because of COVID, if something happened to the coach, if they tested positive, they needed to quarantine. Not only then are you impacting one team, but you're impacting both teams. So initially we had a couple examples where a coach was coaching two teams. So we made some changes to the coaches. They were all very understanding. And then with the stipends, first of all, we adjusted or prorated the stipends because it's at the middle school, it's a much shorter season. It's typically 8 to 10 weeks and they're doing 4 weeks. But the reason for the difference, Lisa, when I think we're in our 3rd year now that we redid all of the sports stipends, and the stipends are based on the first year teacher's salary, and we have different tiers. But any coach who was making more than what the new stipends were that were implemented a few years ago, any coach that had been making more than that kept that stipend versus the new ones. So that's why there's a couple of them on there that are slightly higher, if that makes sense.
Sure. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Joyce? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion and a second to approve the personnel report.
I so move.
I'll second the motion. Yeah.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the report is approved. Thank you, Joyce. We'll then move on to the superintendent and director's report, and I will turn that over to Superintendent Holtzman.
Thank you. I hope we have a chance to review the superintendent and director's report. Any comments, questions, or clarifications you'd like from any of those of us who provide some information?
Yes, I have I have a question in regard to the CARES Act funding. The background information made reference to a second round of CARES funding, and I was wondering, and it's tentatively to the tune of $3.3 million for the Manitowoc School District, which sounds wonderful. Do we have any? Are you aware of any timelines in regard to when we might hear a final word on that?
Yeah, right now there's a 14-day period that we're waiting for the Joint Finance Committee to review it. And so they have the authority to make some recommendations to potentially change. I had a meeting last week with our local legislatures, and they did not have much feedback about changes that would be pronounced. So once it goes through the Legislative Fiscal Bureau for the 14 days, they have a chance to look at it, then it becomes part of the policy. So the governor receives the money from the federal government, and then he provides a plan to distribute that. And then the DPI will create the avenues to distribute it. Mm-hmm. And so it is a reimbursement, and they'll give us some specific details. They gave us some overarching ideas on
how we can spend the money. It's for reimbursement for COVID-related expenses, but there are some things in there that we might be able to do. One that probably sparks everybody's eyes is to be able to help missed educational opportunities due to COVID. So again, looking at ways that we can help support students who weren't as successful we would have liked during this past 1 year. We can find some resources for that. So as soon as we receive the final word that we're going to, the final word, we have an estimate of what we're going to receive and what the set aside is for the state, then our team will go about creating the paperwork and files necessary to review and be reimbursed by that. I believe it's going to be through August 30th of 2023. So expenses all the way through that time we can look at. But again, earmarked for specifically expenses you have for COVID or for combating COVID-related things. So we'll talk about that in all kinds of different avenues once we know for sure.
Okay. And Mark, it goes until when? 2023? September?
Yes.
September?
I believe it's August, but I think,
Okay.
Use September 1 as the kind of guideline.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that it goes, it will be extended that far. I just want to express my thoughts that I think an important area, that those funds need to be used in part is that whole area of the, the learning loss and the learning gaps that the pandemic have either created or have intensified. And I'm wondering, has there been any tentative planning, in anticipation of the dollars, is there any thought in regard to how and when we're going to assess kids in trying to determine who's in need?
So the answer to that question simply is yes. We've had some initial conversations, probably several, about how we might go about using the resources. I would tell you that there's always two challenges to state grants, that you're getting reimbursed. If in fact you do use that to hire people, right, to pay staff, et cetera, when that time period is up, that resource that you have either becomes a school's responsibility or you have to take it away. That makes sense. So, one of the strategies sometimes is you hire folks to help support intervention strategies, which is exactly what we want to do. And then we rely heavy on those. And then in 2 years, we're either going to be responsible for adding that to our budget or cutting those positions that we hired that were doing good things. So that's not a reason not to do it, but it's just something to be aware of. Like, okay, what is the strategy long-term and what is the strategy short-term? So those are some things that we're looking at. Summer school, again, we in Manitowoc have had a robust summer school that we provide all kinds of opportunities. I would tell you that that is not the case. It is my understanding that some of those summer school pieces will be reimbursed, or we could use reimbursement in this. So that's an opportunity. In addition, there's some other things in there. They talk about air exchange and HVAC. So we have older buildings that probably could utilize some new air exchange pieces, right? But again, we have to be really careful about opening up that, right? I know Wilson, Washington, and Lincoln first comes to mind, but all of us know if we're remodeling 100-year-old buildings, sometime what we think is a $100,000 project becomes a $300,000 project real quickly because we weren't ready for what we unpacked. So we have had some initial conversations. There's no doubt our focus with these dollars are going to be the learning loss that has occurred, but we do want to have a target that's not just now, but can be extended for a long period of time. So what can we use the money for now, and how might we evaluate that process so that we can utilize that in the future?
Okay. And I'm sure you would give the board updates, as
Absolutely.
it makes determinations in that regard.
Right. It's hard to spend the money until we have it for sure, right? So I'm a little cautious about promoting great plans because the Legislative Fiscal Bureau has some ability to make some changes to that. So we want to be assured that the dollar amount that we're expecting is what we get.
understand that.
And as that's planned out, are the teachers involved, since they are definitely the boots on the ground
Yeah.
and knowing what a lot of those needs may be?
We have just had literally internal conversations now. I haven't made any presentation yet to staff about here's how we're going to do that. And once we know specifically, like, hey, we've got this money and we now have to make a plan to utilize that money, we will involve staff. We're just not quite there yet. I just wanted to make the board aware that it's available. We're hoping it's available.
Yeah.
Mark, I also had a question under open enrollment. Under open enrollment, it does indicate that the open enrollment window will be opening February 1st and will run until April 30th. You know, could you clarify for me? I thought that that window, you know, was not as defined as it had been in the past, and that people can open enroll at almost any time. You know, please correct me if I'm really wrong on this.
So there is a state established open enrollment window. That open enrollment window is what the state encourages families to do if they want to choose a school that is not in their neighborhood, right? Not in their school district. However, there is open enrollment applications that families can apply for at any time throughout the entire year. And if in fact they claim for the best interest of the students, school districts can deny that. However, in my experience, if they take it to the DPI, they will overrule the school district's denial every time. So the answer to that is there is a window. There is opportunities during that window for school districts to set clarifications on how many open enrollment students you can take and if you're full or if you're not. But if you haven't denied a student because of, you know, you haven't closed it because of special ed or whatever reason, some school districts close regular ed open enrollment opportunities. And you deny somebody because they want to come from, I don't know, Two Rivers, or they want to leave us to go somewhere else, you can say no, and the other district can say yes. And this, if they appeal it, the DPI, in my experience, has never upheld the district's appeal. You're always going. So the answer to your question is there is an open enrollment window, but it doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So, Mark, when a student goes to another district, then does their funding go along with them, like the remainder of the portion of the year? Is that prorated? Or is that just done on a yearly basis? I mean, it seems like it'd be a financial nightmare, but I have no idea. So.
Yeah, Angela can articulate. I think you said it very well. So to the tune of about $1.3 million to the Manitowoc Public School District for open enrollment out versus in. This, you know, give or take about $8,000. There is some proration, right, that would occur if somebody open enrolls after the third Friday count. And I would also articulate that students who open enroll out always have the right to come back to your own district at any time. So we always will accept students. If they don't like it, you know, I'm going to go to another school district regionally and it's going to be the best thing in the world and they don't like it, they always have the opportunity to come back. And we get that occasionally, but typically open enrollment also. So for example, this year we had 60 additional students who open enrolled to a virtual school, one actually in a Madison region. We have, I would say at least 3 of those students have came back to us. They came back because they did not attend the open enrollment. They didn't do anything and they just say, all right, you get to come back. So then, you know, we have them with no credits. So there are challenges within that. Then now we're responsible for trying to catch up somebody who hasn't been with us since, you know, the beginning of the school year. But yes, there is some proration, but in that case, likely we're not going to get anything back because it's after third Friday and after the second Friday count. So, you know, we can work through the process, but generally it's $8,000 out for a regular ed kid.
Okay. Thanks.
Mark, if a student is open enrolled in and they're not responding to the program that district is offering, can that district then say, we are now declining your open enrollment because you're not attending, you're not engaged, you're not successful?
Truancy is the only factor right now that you can, so behaving like is no unless you expel them, unless their behavior is at expulsion. But if they do not attend, they're a habitually truant student. You may work through a process after 3 communications to the family and send them back to their, we call it neighborhood school. We try to do that if we have to at a logical place like the semester or the quarter, rather than on February 7th or something, because obviously we do want the school district to be able to take them at a place that they're being successful.
Yes. Okay.
Do students have to give reasons at all, or is it just, I want to do it?
Yep. So they give reasons, but if the reason, so you know, they have to check one of 4 or 5 boxes. If one of the boxes is if of the best interest of the student is the most common marked, and they just say, that's why I'm going. Right. I would tell you, Carrie, that most of our open enrollment students, outside of the ones who are going to a virtual school, are open enrolling to a district that is closest to them. So the example I would give you is that people who live on the north east side of town are more likely to open enroll the 2 Rivers. And people who live on the southwest side of our school district are more likely to open enrollment to Valders. You just see that because they have to get there on their own, right? They have to figure out a way to get there. So our 3 districts that we see most open enrollment to would be 2 Rivers, Valders, and Reedsville. Or no, Reedsville.
Okay.
2 Rivers, Valders, and Michigan, because of the region they are. So,
But reasons are just, I mean, can be anything. I know we used to get open enrollment students come to McKinley simply because the program was unique to the area, and it wasn't available. It wasn't available in other school systems. So
right.
that
So
seemed to be a good reason, you know. So
right. Everybody has their own reason. It might be someone, you know, there is a number of students who have attended, that we'll use 2 Rivers, for example, that's popular, have attended 2 Rivers for 12 years of their career, and their parents moved from 2 Rivers to Manitowoc. And they say, hey, I'm a junior in high school. I want to continue in the school I've always been to. Now they open enroll back to that school. That's common. But there's also families, right? There's also families who say, my childcare is in this community. My grandparents live there. I went to that school. I want some, you know, there's all kinds of different rationales, but it's something that this community or this board has talked about before, and it's something that we probably can continue to look at, is there is a divide that has been growing between the number of open enrollment kids in compared to the number of open enrollment kids out. And it's probably fair to say that some of that is their perception of what they're getting. Like, I perceive that something else is better than this.
Does a student from 2 Rivers bring the 2 Rivers allotment to the Manitowoc County schools? I mean, since 2 Rivers pays more per student, right? You know what I'm saying?
No,
there's no
so it's the same
reciprocity
amount.
there or anything like that?
No, so no, the dollar amount is the same. Yeah, I would wish that would happen, because we get a bonus every time because we spend less than everybody. But
yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, the dollar amount is set by the state. It's about $8,000 for a regular ed student. No matter what school district you go to, virtual, brick and mortar, local, however.
Okay.
Okay, any more questions on the report?
I would just have one question, not on the report itself, but the board members receive all of these reports.
All of the,
you know, we usually get a lot of them the last day. The public doesn't receive all of those on the public agenda.
Wait,
How is
Dave?
the public?
How is the public
those
able to
reports?
access those
Can't
reports?
hear.
Mark, can you mute your mic so that, because otherwise we get a feedback? Thanks.
Thanks, Meredith.
You got it? Okay, I'll try that again.
That is, yeah.
My question is on the reports. We receive more reports on our agenda than the public does for these meetings. How does the public access the reports that they aren't receiving on that public agenda, if they wish to have them?
I'll mute myself.
Sure, sure. There isn't too many times where there are reports, the director's report and any report that the public wants access to, they can just request access to. We generally make almost every one available, and we can make all of those reports available. But again, if there's something that they're trying to reach and they can't, if they communicate to the district office, to Lori or myself, we will definitely send that report to anybody in our public. What we can do if people are looking for this report is we can make this one available after the meeting so people can take a look at that.
And then we will move on to the referendum discussion.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it's all right. It's a cheering part. My goal tonight is to just again give you some overview of the referendum and provide some opportunities for us to talk about it at the board. I have a presentation that I will share with you that we can just briefly go over. I just want to remind you that when I'm sharing my presentation, I'm not able to see if you have a question or raising your hand, so you're just going to have to cut in and I will stop. But I do want to make sure, my goal is that the board has regular talking points. And again, I'll share some communication strategies down the road, but yeah, I just want to make sure that you're comfortable with information regarding the board, and if people have, and then we'll be able to publish this to our community and share that. So I'm going to present my screen here, and hopefully you will be able to see that. I'll wait for Lori to give me the thumbs up. Okay, so again, just to make sure that everybody understands, and probably more for our public than the board, but we're asking for $4.3 million annually for 3 years to maintain existing programs, fund capital programs, technology needs, and retain quality staff. This is an operating budget, a referendum, so it goes to that. And probably the big fact is, if approved, the referendum is going to help all schools, all students, all programs with little to no tax impact. And we'll talk about what that means moving forward. Again, we talk about what we're going to do, right? We talk about these wide variety of academic courses and programs. We talk about 21st century workforce development skills. We talk about class sizes, employee training and development, competitive wages and benefits, capital improvement projects, and technology and hardware and software. I think in our committees, we've heard about all kinds of these things, but in order for us to continue to provide the educational experiences that we hope for our students, we want to make sure that we're maintaining. And I'm not here talking about adding, we're just talking about maintaining. One of the things that we want, and I want you to understand, is why doesn't the state formula cover our costs? And what happens is that the state funding formula is not providing us even enough to meet our inflationary costs. And so when we look at our $80 million budget that we recently passed, we talk about this per pupil expenditure. And what the state does typically is they give the school district a per pupil expenditure, the same across the state. And what happens is, because we have been a fiscally responsible school district since the revenue limits came on in '94, we are going to continue to lose money and resources from the state. And again, without this operating referendum, we can't continue to maintain our current programs. And what you'll see a little bit tonight is some of those examples. So if the referendum passes, we're looking at the first year that school tax levy is estimated to decrease by 1 cent. So we're looking at $7.81 per $1,000 of equalized value to $7.80. And in addition to that, I think the board knows, but I want to reiterate that we're looking at making a $1.3 million budget reduction over the next 3 years to balance our budget. Currently, in addition to the referendum dollars that the public passed 3 years ago, we're taking $1.3 million out of our fund balance to balance our budget. And we know that if we continue to take $1.3 million out of our fund balance, that soon will go away and we won't have a fund balance, right? We can't use this down the road for the future, and we're going to have to make some adjustments. So we're preparing to do that over 3 years instead of 1 year. And That's with passing that referendum. So one of the things that, in general, we say, where is Manitowoc and how are we and where do we feel like we should be within our community and our state? So when we talk about the property tax levy of $7.81, we know that that's the lowest in Manitowoc County, and I've got a slide to show that. We also see that $11,825 per pupil spending means that Manitowoc ranks 386 out of 420 in Wisconsin. So the way to understand that is the Wisconsin public schools on average spend $13,280 per pupil. That's $1,995 per pupil more than Manitowoc, or $9.9 million annually. So what I want you to understand that is if we spent the average, not the top 10% or 5%, the average of the per pupil, we would have almost $10 million in our budget more to help support students' learning programs and commitments to our schools. Here's an example of our county's net tax levy, right? So you see where Manitowoc is. Our current net tax levy right now is the lowest it's been in 10 years. So it's gone down over the last 10 years. But when you see us compared to our just regional area, you see that we have had a great value. The other piece that I think that is interesting, when you look at the state average, what I want you to see in this document is if you look at this gap right here, this gap in 2008-2009 was $1,400. This is the state average, and this is our spending. And this is, you see some ups and downs here.
Yeah.
This gap right now is $1,900. This gap is growing, right? So not only are we not making any gains towards the average, we're moving away from the average over a 10-year period. And again, is it significant? It's not, but when you're down here, right, and the state is up here, you're seeing significant changes. So that's something that the only way we can make reductions in the gains is through a referendum. The other factor that is absolutely critical to look at within our system, and we've talked about this, is this private school voucher payment over the last 5 years. So this number here is $150,000. And this number here is $1.9 million. This is all onto the tax levy. So as we look at the tax levy and how much this affects our tax levy, we know that this number right here equates to 72 cents on the levy. So what I mean by that is if we were not required to pay this $1.9 million to students who do not attend our school district, our levy would be 72 cents less. But because we're required to pay that, it affects our overall levy. So you can see what happens here in this slide. It's not perfect in terms of the visual, but you'll see the blue portion is our levy, right? And the red portion is the private school voucher. And what you're seeing, obviously, is that the levy amount that we're actually spending is going down, and the red amount is going up. This blue amount is the amount of money we're using, right, to help support our schools. The red amount is the amount of money that's going to kids who aren't in our schools.
Yeah.
There's nothing we can do about that, but it's a factor as we look at what money is available to us. I shouldn't say there's nothing. We can communicate our interest, but I'm not asking the board to do anything at this time. So I think one of the questions in, and I don't want to emphasize this because I want to be optimistic about where we're at, and we talk about what happens if the referendum fails, right? So then we're forced to make this $4.3 million in budget cuts. And again, we talk about staff programs, capital improvement, technology. We do know that 80% of our operating budget is salary and benefits, so the largest share of cuts have to come from staffing. And so what you look at is, let's use, a $70,000 position, which is salary and benefits. So it's not just salary, it's salary and benefits. You take that 49, you multiply it by 70, you get $3.4 million. It's still not 4.3, that's 49 staff positions district-wide, right? Administrators, teachers, support staff, everything. And we still then would be required to provide the same amount of service and programs expectations, right? Our kids aren't going to say, well, because we didn't pass a referendum, I shouldn't get the great education that I deserve. Well, that's not true. We want to try to do that, but it is going to be significantly different. The other thing to note is that if the referendum fails, the current public law prohibits us from going back to referendum for one annual year. So we'll have to make that budget cut for not just 1 year, but likely for 2 years until we know what's happening. So that would be definitely a devastating process for us. We would obviously have to bring those reductions to the board, and we'd be a part of that, but that would be a very difficult process. So in general, we can say, what can you do? Be informed, right? We know the facts. We're going to tell other people why. We're going to ask questions. We're going to vote. We're going to tell people to vote. I do have some plans in the future to provide some public input sessions. I think the discussion is going to be, is it best to just do those virtually, or do we want to provide some open opportunities? We could talk about that. I'm happy to do both or either. But I just wanted to make sure the board had an opportunity to see that and then ask any questions. So I will stop sharing and take a pause here and see if there's any questions that people have.
I have a comment. I really thought the packet was very well done, except there's missing parts. The missing parts are that we're not spending a low amount on students just because we're frugal or because we're mean-spirited, but we spend low amounts and because it's part of the formula that's imposed on all the schools detrimentally to us. I mean, we kind of don't, we don't have to take the responsibility for why we're so underfunded. And the reason why we need a referendum is because, well, why don't we just jack up the taxes? Why don't we just go ahead and say, well, we really have a need here. We're just going to jack up the taxes. Well, of course we can't do that because of state policy. So I think you have to kick the state a bit on this. Because I talked to people last night at the Central Labor Council, and I said there are two major issues, going ahead here in terms of elections. And one is you need to elect the right people to the school board. And the second one is, more importantly, or just equally as important, is we have to have a passage of this referendum. And I explained why that was the case. It wasn't just because, we haven't done business well in the last 50 years. It's not because we're just real reluctant to ask for a tax increase. It's because we're underfunded as a result of the formula, and we can't do anything about it because of the tax caps. So I think that we have to explain to voters that, son of a bitch, it isn't us that caused this problem. It's the inadequate and inequitable policies. I mean, I know you don't want to get into politics, but the fact of the matter is that we have to explain how we got here. And we got here because of policy.
Well, I think the other thing here is, it's difficult for people to understand. It's a little difficult for me to understand, it's that current and future state funding has been influenced by our past conservative spending.
Sure.
One would think that the state is going to treat every school district the same, but it's dependent upon how you spent in the past.
Right, exactly.
And if you're cautious on how you spent your money and you're conservative, you're paying for it now because you don't have that base. It's
you need to say that though, because we get state money based on, what we've traditionally used.
Right.
So the fact of the matter is that that policy has really caught up with us. And as you showed very well, I mean, I thought the divergence of the state stuff and the Manitowoc stuff, resulting in, a $2,000 gap. That was great, but we need to somehow very simply explain that isn't something that we deliberately caused.
Yeah,
If I-
Mark, I really like that presentation too. I really appreciated what you put together. And I think, as you put your show on the road, I think you need to be very specific in what happens if this does not pass. And I mean, state that out, but we need to say this means 40 kids in a classroom during a pandemic.
Yeah.
This means the potential elimination of boys basketball. We need to be very honest in what those decisions really do entail with cutting staff. And really, I don't want to play on anybody's sympathies, but it may mean your kid gets services and your kid does not, because we don't have enough people to go around. And folks need to know that their grandkid may not get the services that they really need. So that's my 2 cents worth, but I think it's really good. It's very solid, and us out advocating and shouting it from the rooftops. That's for sure.
Yeah, and Meredith, I had the same observation. First off, Mark, I thought the PowerPoint is very well done. It's not extremely lengthy. It's to the point, but I thought that was that really needs to be powerful. The impact if we don't pass that referendum. That's got to be a powerful message, because it's going to have a significant impact on what Two Rivers public school education looks like. Two Rivers, Manitowoc public school.
Yeah.
That Manitowoc public school education is going to look like. So that does have to be a powerful part, I think, of our presentation. I was also wondering, Mark, I think that private school voucher graph that you have. It's pretty powerful, but I'm wondering whether there shouldn't be some narrative. You explained it very well, and I'm wondering whether there shouldn't be in your PowerPoint a narrative describing some of those things that you stated. This number that we're seeing in private school vouchers, we're not seeing any end to the growth of that. And that's having a significant impact on our budget, and I think. It's the general public needs to understand, it's how it does impact.
Mark, another thing that I think we really need to stress is that this is cost neutral.
Right.
So there is no increase. There is no increase to the taxpayer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So when opposition comes around, they can't use the fact or say, well, it's a tax increase. So why would you oppose it? I mean, what would be the logic of opposing this?
Yeah. How do you save the kids from this? Well, you vote right. You vote yes.
Well, sure. So we really need to stress this is cost neutral. There is no tax increase. So they need to get the facts straight, and we need to make them understand that this is cost neutral. So that's just my comment.
Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah, and I think, we need to be very logical and strategic. I say we, and I know, Mark, that falls heavy on your shoulders, but I think it needs to be very strategic where these things are occurring as well. Obviously, we're able to communicate those through social media. And some of the voters may listen to the radio. Some of them may still have a subscription to the HTR, but I feel like that's very small percentage. It's not the parents who are listening or reading those avenues, right? They're going to be on social media, billboards, right? I think we might need to invest a little bit of money to get that messaging out appropriately. And I would be in full support of sinking a little bit of money to potentially be able to get that thing passed.
I'd like to make a comment too. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I've had several community members and teachers, just people who are really vested too and are passing this referendum suggests that we use Facebook as kind of a go-to to promote this because so many parents are on that media. So I think that's a really good idea. But I guess one of the things that I really want to just say, and I'm speaking to the choir right now when I'm looking at all of you guys, but you know, this has been a terrible year to bring forth a referendum. You know, we're fully aware that we are dealing with COVID and that there's a lot of issues and hard feelings about what's being taught and what's not being taught. But the reality is for all of our students and all of our families of those students is that we're not asking for a single penny more of what we've had in the past. We need this money to carry on with the services we currently have, with the teachers we currently have. And if we don't pass this referendum, things are going to dramatically change. I think that's what we're all saying over and over again. But it's not going to be pretty if we don't pass this. I'd also like to make the comment, because this has been suggested again by a lot of people, even through the media, that we're bringing forth going face to face because we want to pass a referendum. I just want to make a public comment right now that I personally would take offense and find it irresponsible if any single one of us ever even mentioned or putting those two things together. We're going to referendum because we need to. We're going back to school, or we're discussing it as face to face because we feel that that's the best for our students. It has nothing to do with passing a referendum, and connecting those two is just simply wrong in my view. So I know that sounds really strong, but actually it makes me very emotional, because I think that that just shortchanges every single one of us who are on this board and our administration who truly care for our kids and our teachers and all those involved in our community. So I'm stopping now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for voicing that, Kathy. You know, it's absolutely, I would guess all the board members feel exactly the same way. There's no connection between, it's how kids receive instruction and the referendum. But thanks for voicing that.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, and I appreciate the comments from the board members, and I'll go back to Carrie's comments about the state. The reason for school districts going to referendum is because the state isn't providing the level of funding that's necessary.
Exactly.
And many districts have to do this, us included. If this would be a $4.3 million cut in our budget, and that should have been the responsibility of the state funding. We should have had that money all along, and we haven't. We've fallen behind since 1994. It's a much larger amount than that. But we cannot maintain the same level of services that we've been providing all along without the additional referendum dollars. And the state has refused to include that in their allocation. And so we have to go directly to the taxpayers and ask them to say, we need this to maintain the same level we're at. We're not asking for more.
Right.
We're not adding anything here. So
exactly.
That's a big part of the message. Absolutely. So I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Yeah, part of the message also needs to be highlighted, where Mark covered it already, is that when we're asking for a $4.3 million referendum, that doesn't actually cover everything. We've been supplying it with an outside fund, and that money is going to be drained at some point, and that we're looking at cutting, and I believe I have the numbers right, 1.3 million over the next 3 years. That alone will be significant cuts. And if we have to do 4.3 in addition to that, I can't imagine what our school system would look like.
Yeah, I appreciate your feedback, and again, I'm trying to do what I can to provide a map for our community to understand. I'm trying not to use the terms like devastating, but I would tell you that not passing the referendum will likely affect our school children for a decade. And it's not about the window that we're talking about between now and April 6th, right? Or what happened in COVID. We're talking about for a long time, because what happens is, right, you have to erode your system, right? When you think about 49 positions. That's just in 1 year, right? We're going to come back in another year. We won't have any additional resources,
Yeah.
right? And so you think about things that we've done already and what we would have to do in the future. Now, having said that, the other piece I would say is in the world of public education, Manitowoc spends in the 8th percentile, right? 8th percentile. There are 388 school districts in the state of Wisconsin that spend more per pupil than Manitowoc. 388. There's only 420 total. So when you think about, should we be the low, like, I don't need to be in the top 5%, even in the 50th percent. But do we really look around and believe that we should be in the bottom 10%? And that's where we are. And that's just where we're stuck because of the funding formula. So again, this is something that we have to move forward. I take Lisa's comments.
But Lisa's comment is the touche thing, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, it's like, this isn't going to cost you anything to do this.
Right.
Just get out there and vote.
Right. And some real facts. And again, I can't predict the future, but I would tell you that 3 years ago, when we had this conversation, we talked about an $8.21 levy. We thought that that's where it was going to be, and then it would go down 2 years in a row. Those you remember that, right? And it actually never went to $8.21. And right now we're talking about $7.80. Heck, that's 40 cents different, right? I mean, we're not even talking about $8.21. We're talking about $7.80, which is so much. It's lower than it was 10 years ago. So again, I understand that there's all kinds of factors to school finance. I'll make sure that I communicate a few other things in regards to the cost neutral and make sure that we emphasize some of those things. What happens if, right? I'll add a few more factors. And again, if there are feedback that you have, we'll keep talking about this on our board meetings. Let me know, and I'll add some things and try to be responsive to your needs.
I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty nervous about this. Just because the mood is not charitable, I don't think. And the 8 other people, other than Lisa, Dick, and myself, the 8 other people that are running are not in favor of this, and that's an indication of something.
I can only imagine that that's just not really understanding how it's going to affect the kids in our district. Right.
Yeah, I also hope that it's not, it's perceived or looked at as being a retaliatory, it's a move, on some people's parts because of the way instruction needed to be provided over the years, over the last, it's last year, I guess, the last calendar year. Yeah, I have some concerns too, but if we do some positive messaging and get the word out, and people need to understand that if they don't vote for the referendum, they're voting against quality education for their kids.
Yep.
Well, they're voting for disaster for the kids. I mean, and anyway.
Okay, if there's any, obviously, if there's questions, feel free to email me, call me, and let me know. I will definitely add some things to this. I also want to spend some time talking about our return to school. We've been a good 2 weeks into our blended learning model. I'm following some health and guidelines, kind of watching internally how our staff health and student health is. And I sent some communication to the board, but again, I just am pleased with where we're at. Our teachers and staff have done an outstanding job of addressing a little bit different return to school in this blended model. What I would like to do is just share with you a recommendation that I'd like to see us move to a full-time model on March 8th. Right now, we saw our burden rate last week be the same as it was in early September or mid-September. We are seeing similar health trends right now. We do still need some time to transition, and there's no doubt in my mind that this will be a challenge for us moving forward. Working with students in a virtual platform is not something that we have been set up for. We know how to do it. We'll continue to do that. But using a virtual platform and a full-time face-to-face platform will require us to open up a little differently. It won't be like we returned to school in January of 2020. It'll look differently. Kids will be wearing masks. We're going to try to social distance to our extent possible. We're going to try to limit opportunities in cafeterias, etc. We're working on plans right now. I don't have all of the details for each building because we're still talking through with staff about what it looks like. But our goal would be really to just take some feedback my goal would be to take some feedback from the board tonight, listen to any comments and concerns you have, and answer any questions you have about what it might look like for us to return on March 8th. So I'll pause there and just see if there's any questions or things that I might be able to answer for you in regards to that conversation.
I'm curious why you picked the date, knowing that teachers will not have vaccinations under their belt by that time.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about a lot of different dates. What I would tell you is that we have a hopeful plan to work through a system-wide vaccination process. But I also know that I cannot count on that plan 100%. And I have concerns, to be honest with you, if we have to go through the county in order to do that, that it will be likely, based on what we're seeing with the county, it will likely be 8 to 12 weeks before our staff could potentially get all vaccinated. Some will get vaccinated, all won't. So then we're talking about, right, if we wait until March 1st, and then we talk about 12 weeks from March 1st, we're talking about June before our staff, and we're not coming back. So I do hope that our plan will be in place and we'll be able to utilize a local healthcare provider that would provide us with some opportunities, and we can do that in early March. But I'm hesitant to count on something that I have no ability to control any of. And so I guess that's the conversation.
So, understanding from some of the teachers at the high school is that there can be upwards of 32 students in a class. And if we lob off 20% of those people being in virtual, that still leaves 26 kids all in one classroom at the same time. So I'm wondering how are we going to discontinue following CDC guidance, or how do we the distance if that's the case?
Right. First and foremost, I would tell you that is it possible that we have some classes with 32 students? Yes. Is that even close to the norm? Not even close to the norm, right? So what I would say is maybe in a class we would have that might be a gym class. It might be a band or choir where absolutely. And so are there ways that we're looking at trying to separate them by using the auditorium or outside space? Absolutely. What I would tell you is that we are going to do everything we can to provide 6-foot distancing, and I will use the term to the extent possible. So in the winter, our students are going to have to use lockers, right? I can't expect someone to bring a coat and a jacket in their boots without using a locker, right? And so we know that's going to happen. But we're also saying right now, the CDC says if we're following protocols and we're wearing a mask, and right, that 15 minutes or more would cause an exposure. And so we're not going to spend 15 minutes at our locker. We're going to try to separate those classes, and will be some classes that, might have a few more. And I don't know that number right now until we do a survey with our parents to see what it looks like. But I would tell you that there will be some cases that there will be a classroom or a situation where someone will be sitting closer than 6 feet wearing a mask. That is true. Not the norm, but that will happen.
And so my understanding is we would have the opportunity to revoke the current decision that we have as a family.
Yeah, so what we would do is next week we would ask families again, based on some guidelines of what we have. You know, here's what our plan will be. And again, we don't have all the specific details, but we're working out lots of them so that you would have an idea. And then we would ask people to fill out that survey. I'm using this a loose number right now, but Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday next week is when it would go out. And again, one of the things that is challenging for us is we have to get an idea how many of our families who are currently virtual will stay virtual, and how many are families who are currently blended will want to go virtual. And I don't know the answer to that, right? We didn't see a lot of transition. We might see some, but that in itself is the largest challenge for our faculty, is working through teaching both virtual and face-to-face kids. I'm pretty sure that I can't speak for the board, but I'm saying I'm committed to providing a virtual option to our families. We have lots of them that want to do that. I'm committed to doing that throughout the school year, and likely we're probably going to talk about virtual options next year. I'm confident that virtual options next year will look different, and we won't ask teachers to do both. But I don't have that ability to shake that system up from March 6th till the end of the year now. So we have some models at the elementary. We're going to work on that you'll see some things that there's going to be some times that we're going to need to build in to help support that. But I won't know what the number is until we do the survey.
I'm concerned about the teachers. And there was some email from teachers just before the meeting, and I've talked to some of them, and I'm most concerned about teachers that have pre-existing conditions. And I don't know if we can get a deal on that or not. I mean, wouldn't you think? I mean, wouldn't you think that Holy Family or somebody like that would say, well, of course, we'll get them into the vaccination program early and take care of the need, because they're essential workers. I mean, they're just absolutely essential workers. And but everything is so bureaucratizedly inflexible, I guess, that I'm not so sure there's a hope for that. But the one thing that I'm encouraged by is that where there are face-to-face schools, they don't seem to be having many problems. I talked to my sister who lives in Ontario, Canada, and schools in Ontario have been open since November, face-to-face, and she has grandkids in the schools, and they seem to be the safest places for anybody to be in the whole province. So, but I do worry about the teachers here.
And Mark, I was wondering too, you kind of gave us the worst case scenario in regard to vaccinations. It could be as late as early summer before, teachers could be vaccinated. Your discussions with Holy Family, what's the best case scenario that they might foresee?
The best case scenario would be the first week in March. We have a date and schedule all of our staff who want to be vaccinated get vaccinated.
Would you do that? Would that be done on site?
Likely we have to go to them because of the security of the vaccination, but we would create a system to do that. Yes, and that's our goal. But I mean, I have no ability, and the reality is Holy Family right now doesn't either, right? They can request it, and they're willing to work with us, right? So I am so pleased, and like we're not pretending like this might happen. Like, we have a plan. We're going to survey our staff to see who's interested in getting the vaccination. We're talking internally, but the results comes on the Friday before, when they put in their, I need X number of vaccinations, and then that sometime over that they get response that says, yes, we got it, or no, we didn't. And then we wait for the next week, right? And then we do it again. Yes, we got it. No, we didn't. We wait for the next week. So, I mean, we would encourage, we know that there are probably 50 or more of our staff members who have already been vaccinated. They're eligible in the 1A model. They're the close contact folks, and we're pleased with that. But we do want all who are interested to get that. But again, I absolutely understand. And I've been talking with, again, our local county health department, state health department, our the county superintendents, the superintendents in Brown County, which is our conference superintendents, all learning about what they're doing and how they're doing it. And you know, what we're seeing is there's not a spread coming from students, right? It doesn't mean that there can't be or won't be, but that's what they're seeing. That's what they're giving us information. So I think it's time for us to do our best and try to provide this the best way we can and get our kids opportunity to be back in school so that we can teach them in the face-to-face model we know how.
So on December 22nd, we approved gating criteria for our phases. This board chose in January to disregard that gating data to come back in a blended model. Are we anywhere near the gating criteria that we approved on December 22nd to move to this phase?
Meredith, I have that information. As of today, our burden rate is 318, which is the lowest it's been since school started. There's a trend, but it's difficult to follow the trends. And again, this is just data, okay? We can use it in whatever direction we want. But that is very near where we needed to be to go back full-time, and we're trending in that direction. We're seeing a consistent drop in the burden rate. In addition, right now, there's only 53 patients in the hospital being treated for COVID, which is half of what it was in September. All of the other numbers are trending in the right direction. Now, we can assume that come March 8th, it's going to improve even more, right? But we don't know that. Just like we don't know when the vaccine is available. And again, these are just statistics, but we are trending towards the fact that on March 8th, we will meet that gating criteria that we established. But at some point we have to, I guess the way I look at it is we have to at some point realize that we're moving towards reopening, and when do we do it?
Absolutely. I don't disagree with that, Dave. I want to make sure we made a promise to our community and we disregarded that in January as far as our gating criteria. That really bothered me. And so I would just want to make sure that we're living up to what we approved initially. And if we are, great. But if we're not, then I think we need to reconcile that.
Right. So our gating criteria would say that we had to be under 400 for 3 consecutive weeks to return to school. And I believe tomorrow will be the 2nd consecutive week of being under 400. So we won't know what happens the 3rd week, right? We don't know that. But the numbers that we're looking at, what happens is it's a 2-week period. And so you take this week and last week's. And if last week's is good and this week's is good, we're on a trend to meet it next week, Wednesday. That's what I guess if I had to predict, I would say, unless something changes, we'll meet the gating criteria or the piece that we had established next week, Wednesday, right? And again, that's just one of the pieces that we're using to say we're getting healthy. We're seeing some dates with single-digit positive rates, which we hadn't seen, since before Christmas. So that would say that yes, we're looking at all the other things we're talking about. Those secondary indicators would be our student and staff health, our ability to provide substitutes, and our ability to provide the PPE necessary. And we're all on board with those as we speak as well.
Is it possible to get our teachers N95 masks at all? I know, we were able to work with some health facilities to secure those. I don't know if is that possible through some of our CARES Act money? We need to protect those teachers.
I can't answer how available they are. I don't know the answer to that, but I can look and see what people want. I'm not sure. I know what we have in those N95 are for our nurses and those administering medications and that kind of healthcare things. So, I mean, I can look. I'm not sure what the availability is.
Wasn't the robotics team creating N95 masks last year?
No, they were providing cloth masks, but not N90. N95 are very specific masks made by, made for filtering out air. It's a medical mask.
Right,
So,
but I thought they were making some very high-tech masks with the oh gosh, why can't I think of it? That printer, the 3D printer.
3D printer. I'm not. They wouldn't be N95 masks, but again,
Yes.
To be honest with you, everybody has all kinds of different styles that they're wearing now, and
Right.
colors and whatever. But I just don't know that I have the ability to purchase enough N95 masks, even if I wanted to. I can look into it for all of our staff.
Okay, that's good.
Mark, going back to that March 8th date, I've had people ask me, why not just wait until after spring break?
That's another month.
Well,
Yeah.
I've had the question come up
Right.
is, we wait until after spring break. By then, the vaccines will surely have been rolled out for the teachers. So it's just comments I've been getting. It's for whatever it's worth. That was just something that people have been approaching me about.
Yeah, I think the process to think about returning to school, is challenging, and finding a time that meets everybody's hopes and expectation is not likely. I received some emails today from staff members who said they're not, what have you thought about this and what about that? And I've received emails from staff who said, can't we just start now? Right. The strategy behind March 8th was based on a couple of factors in terms of how much time we have to make a plan, right? And to be able to make that plan. And from the facts that I honestly feel like we can do this healthy. We can provide our students and our staff a learning opportunity in a safe manner. And I'm watching communities around the nation be able to do this in a safe manner. And we're not seeing the spread. Our pediatricians are saying it's right time. We're using, if I use the gating criteria that we articulated, likely in a week, we would have said, yes, it's time.
Mhm.
So, the reason I'm thinking March 8th is because if I wait till next Wednesday before I have a conversation, then it's the next board meeting, right? And then it's probably not till spring break. Like, we need to make that conversation because I've got to ask the staff or the parents about what their preference is and make our plans so that we can help support that. But I would also tell you that, there's all kinds of different factors, and I have lots of concerns from our secondary schools about current seniors who are in jeopardy of not graduating because of failing or incomplete classes. And the more I wait, the 3, 4, 5 more weeks I wait, the less chance that they have potentially to graduate because the learning style that we provided wasn't one that they jumped onto. And I know that's not the only reason, but I am worried about where we sit right now with some of our students. So I understand.
Are we looking for a vote on this tonight?
A vote?
Yeah.
No, so what happened was again, the board. I'm really looking for. I just want to have the conversation. I'm really looking for your blessing. To be honest with you, the board voted last time to grant the administration the authority. But I also understand your role and responsibility, and I want to make sure the board can live with this decision moving forward. And and have a public conversation about it, right? Because it's definitely, you're going to get feedback either way. You're going to get feedback. So I want to make sure that I hear what you have to say. I'm considering that before I would make any announcement and move forward.
I guess I would just like to say, you know, my heart goes out to teachers, especially who are really worried about returning for their safety. Hopefully there will be more that are vaccinated before we return to school. But today, even I was listening to the news, and the CDC is actually recommending that children go back to school face to face with safety precautions in place, even if their teachers are not inoculated. So, and you know that I've been saying this for a couple months now. I'm seriously worried about the mental well-being of our kids. That reflects into their education also. In these last weeks, I'm aware of even more issues with mental health, where it's hitting closer to home with kids who are in school. I mean, this is a serious issue. We need to get back in it. Sometime we need to get our kids back into the school classroom. So I fully support it, Mark.
Yeah, I support it too.
It's a hard thing, right? Because no matter what, some people are going to be unhappy and some people aren't going to agree. But I think for our kids' sake, they need to be in school for those parents who choose it. I add that, you know, but that's where I'm at.
Carrie, I'll address your question, and it's for the whole board. You can present a motion and have it seconded and approved, how you want this return to take place, or we can leave that decision with the superintendent who has that authority, which we've done. That's part of his role as superintendent. The board can always make a motion and overrule that if they choose. So that's up to the board right now. What our superintendent is asking for is that we continue to allow him to make these decisions.
Yes. And I
Within-
feel
Yeah, okay.
So that's where we're at with that, Carrie, okay?
Okay, sure, thanks. You know, you may want a sense of the house if you don't already have it. I think, you know, there's a sense of affirmation here, I think, but
I would disagree, Carrie. I don't think it presents a safe situation when our kids can't distance. My child personally is wearing 3 and 4 layers sitting in a classroom because a window has to be open because we don't have great ventilation in some of the buildings.
okay.
I understand mental health, Kathy. I am so with you on that. And this is a horrible decision to have to support or not.
right.
I personally am not comfortable with that. And I'm speaking as a parent with that. But I totally respect where you're coming from as well as where the district is coming from.
Yep. And same here, Meredith. I mean, I totally value your opinions too, but I just see it in a different way. So, yep.
Well, the challenge for the board and for the superintendent is that, one, we don't know when a vaccine will be available. Okay. There's no certainty to that. It could be a lengthy period of time. It could come up quicker than we'd like it to. What we really have to do is as best as possible, provide a safe environment, right? For our staff, for our students, for everybody. I'm confident that that's going to happen and that is happening right now. But we just don't know. And the other factor is, and we don't have data to support it, but we certainly have a lot of feedback that learning is not being done as well as it could be for some of or many of our students. And that's a critical factor as well. But how do we put that all together, right?
Right.
How do we do that? And I understand, we're getting feedback from staff members who are really concerned, and I really understand that. I certainly don't want to put myself in a position where I become more vulnerable than I need to be. And how do we do that? How do we balance that? That's a real challenge for us, isn't it? It's certainly a challenge for our staff and our administration, but we have to make a decision and we have to try to put it all together, provide the best learning environment and a safe learning environment. That's part of our mission.
I think we also need to be prepared. There are districts that are also making this decision and they are seeing teachers leave in the middle of the year, breaking contracts, and we need to be prepared for that as well.
Yeah,
there are ramifications to the decisions we're making, clearly, and there have been all along, right? We've seen that occur all along in this. And, you know, the way I've looked at it is we're not making anybody happy in this. We can't. We're just, you know, some people are satisfied, but they're not really happy. And then we have people that just are looking for some reason to disagree with what we're doing or not like what we're doing. It's a tough decision.
But how much of a jump is it from a blended situation to a full face-to-face? I mean, have we had any negative fallout from going blended? That hasn't been mentioned. So I assume it hasn't been major at all, if at all. But it's just one more incremental step, isn't it?
Mhm.
Well, and then of course you have the virtual component with it, which is challenging for our staff, right?
Oh, yeah.
How do you do a class of, whether it's 26 kids or whatever it is, and you got 6 or 7 kids in virtual, and then you're trying to, it's not a real good way.
It's a horrible situation.
Yeah, it is.
Terrible.
It is. And, you know, how do we get that to work as well as possible? And I guess that's the responsibility of our administrative staff, right? To come up with a better method of providing that. I mean, I've got the superintendent here, and he knows that. I'm not out here to jump on him with that, but we know that we have to do that as well as possible.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So, Mark, my other concern is teacher workload with this. If they are potentially conducting 7 periods in person and teaching virtually at the same time, is that sustainable for the next 3 months? I feel like we kind of went into this semester already burnt out, and I'm very conscious of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think I'm confident that what you're going to see in the next board meeting when I bring some of the models to the board is some changes to what you're going to see in a day in order to provide some opportunities. I think it's a little different at each level, right? We have at the elementary level right now, and again, I don't know how many we'll need, but we have 23 classroom teachers who is responsible for 100% of their job is virtual learning. They're teaching only virtual students.
Mm-hmm.
So at the elementary level, again, assuming that the people stay in the models that they, you know, and we can do that. We may have to pull some back if less people come, but, you know, there's still always going to be this component of, I have a lot on my plate. What I guess I would articulate to you, Meredith, is that pre-pandemic workload and work-life balance was a stressor for our staff, right? It is a tough job to teach 4 subjects in an elementary school, right? And provide learning environments optimal to kids. Like, it's a tough job. When we look at the middle school, they have a couple of built-in times in their day. It's not ideal. It's not the only time, but there are some times in that. In the elementary school, they don't have that collaboration time. So we're talking through, you know, do we add a little time? The challenge is, right, that, you know, if we have an early release or if we have an extra day off, then we're affecting the learning, right? We have one less teaching day, or we're providing, you know, parents have to pick up kids early. You know, there's no ideal model that we can go to right now that's going to provide us with enough supports academically for our kids, right? Back to school all the time, and our teachers. But we're working through a few things. You're going to see, I think, some things that look a little bit differently. Very specifically at our secondary levels, where we have kids that if we don't make some adjustments to what's happening for their incompletes and poor grades right now, we're going to have a significant number of non-graduates, or someone's at the board's going to get a recommendation that we should change our graduation requirements. And I don't agree with that. Like, I don't think we want to do that.
Yeah.
Right. But
No,
those are the kind of things that, you know, in a year from now, when, if, you know, again, we don't want to just say why we're doing something. We get a report card that says that, you know, 78% of our kids graduated, you know, we're going to look around and go, well, how did that happen? Well, because we didn't make adjustments. So Some of those adjustments will be teachers working with individual students. Some of those adjustments will be working on a model, knowing that the general public and our staff is accustomed to, at the elementary, 8:15 to 3:15 with not a lot of time in between to do a whole lot of anything, right? And except for teach. So, recess is going to look different, right? I mean, just getting kids in and out is going to be different. So one of the things that I thought about was March 8th provides us with 3 weeks and then spring break of a breather, right? I get to just step back for a second and take a breath, come back after that, right? Then we've got a month with a few days off. We asked for that 29th day, some other PD times, and hopefully we can look for the end, and it's a sprint at the end. We know that's challenging. I am also concerned about our staff, but I don't have like a magic bullet that says we're going to be able to create something that is not going to have some stress and some angst, because we are committed, I think, and I'm not representing the board well, to providing a virtual option for all of our families who want it now to the end of the year and probably in the near future. I think we have to do that. That's going to cause us to have a little bit of, I'm going to have to be living in both worlds a little bit. I might need a little more time to deal with that, but right now that's the challenge. That to me ultimately is as big of a challenge as being healthy, if not bigger.
Yeah.
So I know we've talking about it. There isn't going to be a perfect answer, right? Again, here's what I would tell you. I've got 18 kids in front of me and 4 online. They'll be able to see, engage in doing something. But that's different than if I have 9 kids in front of me, right? Because 9, I can manage that a little different. I got 18. I have to manage 18 human beings, right? With all the interactions that are going on, in addition to what's happening. So we're going to try to do our best. It won't be ideal. We're going to make it. I'm confident if we come back with virtual learning next year, it will be different. Maybe at the elementary, it might be similar because we pull that aside. But right now, I don't know that I have an alternative. We still have blended learning is some online and some at home. So again, I feel like we've seen some other folks be successful in this. I'm confident that our teachers, they've risen to the occasion every single time. And I want to try to help them be supportive as much as we can moving forward.
Well, it's all the more reason we need to not fire them in a year because we're short of money. I mean, honestly, what a bunch of choices. I mean, I'm thinking, wow, what a wonderful time to be on the school board.
I'm telling you what, you look in our history, right? And we talk about difficult decisions. Maybe during Black History Month, you can think what it would like to segregate schools, right, and the death threats or whatever. But I'm pretty certain that since that time, there has not been a more difficult time being a school board member. Absolutely not. The pandemic, right? And now trying to figure out how we come back out of school learning and virtual, blended. This is not easy, right? And you guys have done great jobs. And, I don't know how many email messages I used to send to the board, maybe once a month. I mean, you get one probably 3 times a week from me now. It just, you have to be engaged. All right, I'll send less. I'll be quiet.
Not even just as a board, it's the same for teachers, right? And even for students. It's just it hasn't been like this for decades. It's just a difficult time in education period for everybody. So, and hopefully people will realize our hearts are, I don't know, for me, I bleed for everybody, right? Because my hearts go out to the teachers. I think this is awful. We want our students to learn. We go out for parents who are making all these adjustments and we're all dealing. It's just for everybody. It's hard. So
I don't know. It seemed, this is only my second meeting. I'm real impressed with the quality of the people who are making the decisions here. So I'm really, really glad to be among you. So
thanks, Gary.
But I think we'll do better than muddle through on this.
Yeah. So
okay, so and this discussion is going to continue. This is just a big part of it right now tonight. But I would just ask, is the board comfortable in allowing the superintendent to continue making the decisions that he's hired to make? Again, you can make a motion, you can bring it back to the control of the board if you'd like. My preference is to continue to allow our administrative staff, including our superintendent, to make those decisions. That's what That's what their role is. Do we have any objection to that? And I'm not talking about what direction you want to go in terms of opening or closing. It's who's in the decision making, who's making the decision here. And I'm very comfortable with continuing it as we are right now. Is there any objection to that?
Dave, I thought we had this dialogue as well at our last meeting.
We did. Yep. I just
And
want to make sure that it continues.
Right. And I think we should stick by, it's the stance that we took last week and continue to let the administrative team, do their work.
Yes.
And again, I'm not asking you to support or reject.
Yep.
I'm asking you who's making the decision. So
Right. And I respect the role of a board member as
Yeah.
well as the role of an administrator. And I do see that delineation and I respect that delineation. It's frustrating sometimes, but I respect that
Yeah.
line.
no. Okay, thank you very much for your input. So we'll move on. I guess district activity update.
That's probably it.
Mark, that's probably it. Yeah. Okay. Well, then the next thing is our new business, and this is tied into how we're providing school in person, whether it's blended or full week. Our school mitigation strategies. I know I had several board members come to me with that and ask what we're going to do. There's a possibility that the mask mandate could be changed, and how do we want to operate in our schools regardless of whether there's a mandate or not. That's where we're at. So I'd open that up for discussion. And there I would like a motion, because I think we should set some kind of policy in that respect, that how we're going to continue throughout, at least throughout the school year. So I'll open it up for discussion.
Well, I believe through this, the rest of the school year, we certainly should be wearing masks. I think that should be mandated for everyone.
Well, and I think beyond masks, I think we should be following the CDC guidelines, it's for the remainder of the school year.
Yeah, and I'm the one that asked Dave to bring this to the table, true transparency. I'm very concerned that we could potentially be challenged down the road should the state legislature continue to move in that direction. And so I think, we've been attempting to be as safe as possible the entire way along, and I think we need to continue to do so, but to officially put it in our record. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, and I think it's smart doing that right now
I'm
too,
with that.
because we are giving families the choice about whether they go to school or be virtual. And if we can say this is what we are setting as a rule, right, for now for the school year, then those parents are then therefore agreeing that their children will be wearing masks in school. It's like saying we agree to these terms. So that makes a lot of sense to do that right now.
I also like the fact, that Mark and the rest of the superintendents in the entire county had made that commitment already, for the remainder of the school year. I think there's power in numbers, and it's nice to know that all of our school district neighbors, it's are of like mind.
I would add with the masks, with a mask mandate. I've had the opportunity to be at a lot of different schools over the school year. And one of the things that is always posted at the door is not just that to wear masks, but they have to cover the nose and the mouth.
Yes.
That's something. And, I've noticed it. I mean, we all notice it. People have it hanging down but almost all of those school districts, right on the doors when I come in, it doesn't just indicate that you must wear a mask, but it does indicate it has to cover the nose and the mouth. I think that's really an important part of it. If you're going to wear one, you do it right. And the other thing I would ask is there anything else, we're talking about school mitigation strategies. Is there anything else that the board wants to make a decision on besides the mask, or should we just stick with a mask issue tonight?
Well, CDC stuff, I think, yeah.
I don't know. I have a real concern over, and before I even became a board member, this was a concern, was about student behavior. So I do have concerns if we make, say, for example, we make masks mandatory within our schools. What if we have students who, you know, carry on and they think they're funny and they rip a mask off somebody? I mean, I really think that this is a time we can address behavior issues and that we need to set serious boundaries and stick to them. You know, it's interesting that we had Washington talking to us tonight and they have seen, you know, like behavior issues. And so I'm concerned though that when we go back, you know, is this something that could happen? Or maybe it's something else that would cause disruption and, you know, children to collide in the classroom or whatever. I just think that our behavior guidelines need to be, you know, laid out very plainly, clearly, and adhered to by all schools very strictly, and not having a lot of tolerance for misbehavior.
Yeah, and Kathy, you know, I'm not going to disagree with you, but that's a discussion for another time because that's not an agenda item, but it's something that we can put on the agenda for the next meeting, for example,
Yeah,
and then
please
discuss
do
that. Okay.
Please do that.
Thanks.
I think that's
I can do that.
appropriate.
I can do that.
Okay.
So
I would make the motion that we require masks as a district in any of our district facilities or events, worn properly until the end of the semester.
And I would second that.
Okay.
I would say school year would be better.
School
School
year.
year might be a better term.
School year.
School year,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What about at outside sporting events? What about at outside sporting events if there's something going on at Rubeck Field?
Yeah, I think so there too.
Yes?
Yeah, I think that's just the expectation across the board.
Okay, on any district property.
I don't have a problem with that. No, I
No?
can't speak for other districts because when in the fall, there were requirements. They had to wear them for a portion of the time in those outside activities. Okay. But some of that came from the WIAA, which controls the sports. So the WIA has that protocol. But I don't have a problem with it. I think if you're going to do it, you know, let's do it right. Right. I mean,
Yeah, it should be consistent, a consistent
it should be
expectation.
expectation. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I got your motion. I would need a second.
I seconded.
I was seconded, yeah.
Okay, sorry, missed that. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we got past that. Any other business? You know, I mean, I guess you're all aware we did suffer the loss of a student.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, so I think our thoughts and prayers need to be with that family. That'll be some very challenging times for that family coming up. But that's never a good thing when those things happen for us. So I don't want to overlook that. Next would be future meeting dates. Our next scheduled board meeting would be Tuesday, February 23rd at noon. And then I would ask any of the department directors if we have any committee meetings that would be coming up. I know we have a meeting for our equity advisory committee. I think that's Thursday, right, Meredith? Does that sound right? I think she's saying yes. Okay. Anybody else? Angela, do you have something?
Yep, I'm planning to work with, contact Dick and yourself to schedule a finance committee meeting.
Got
And
it.
Mark.
Okay.
Thanks. Joyce, you got anything?
Not in the next 2 weeks.
Okay, could I just make a comment to Joyce? I did submit that policy 1240 to you. Were you able to look at that and review that? And we will be looking at that. We will be looking at that.
Yeah, I did get that, Lisa. Is it something you want to do in the next 2 weeks before then? We can, if you want to do it before the next board meeting.
When was the next personnel meeting?
We don't have one on the calendar right now, so.
Okay, I think we should.
Okay,
I'd like to get that. I'd like to get that rolling.
Okay, and there's always other topics we can talk about and keep you informed of. So, all right, Lisa, I'll connect with the committee and schedule something.
Thank you.
I lost
So
it.
yes, Dave.
Okay, thank you, guys. Let's see, what else do we have? Chris, building and grounds?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And let's see, curriculum, Jason or
We'll
Pam?
be meeting on the 18th.
18.
The curriculum meets on the 18th.
Yes.
I don't know the mechanism for meeting at this, do we do it? We do it by Zoom, right?
Well, Carrie, being the new member, you have to bring the donuts. Remember that. Don't forget.
Virtually?
I don't care.
Okay.
So they take-
Do you have a time for that? February 18th
Yep, 6 o'clock.
Okay, thanks, Pam.
in the evening, right?
Yes.
And then I have an announcement to make, and Meredith just sent this to me. Thank you, Meredith. At tonight's Chamber Awards, Dana Bongo won Educator of the Year. So Dana
wow.
is at
Wow.
Lincoln High School, correct? Yep.
Mm.
So that's great to know. All right. Anything else that anybody wants to bring up before we ask for adjournment?
I'm sure I'll think of things after the meeting is over.
Yeah, well, it's like going to the grocery store, right? You get
Right?
home and
Yep.
all the stuff you forgot.
Yeah.
All right. I would entertain a motion to adjourn in a second.
I'll move we adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Pretty good.
Aye.
job.
Aye.
Thanks. Hi.
Hey, thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
we'll hopefully